Hello, everyone. I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Today is Wednesday, September 16th, 2020. Today, we'll be looking at the Pokemon market. This is something that we've talked about on several episodes. We did a very brief introduction earlier on. So today, we'll kind of we'll go back in a little bit more detail, looking through the history of Pokemon, the different sets, the different eras of the game, and provide some context, provide a bit of a range. Not everyone out there has a lot of liquid assets where they can be investing tens of thousands, hundreds of $1,000s into these high-end cards or high-end sealed product. So today, I'll give my recommendations. I'll kind of look through all the different product, see where everything is at, look at the history, and then provide some ranges for people who may be looking to get into the hobby, maybe looking to start investing as a way to get in and start building a Pokemon portfolio. My beverage of choice today: iced coffee, a little bit of hazelnut creamer, a little bit of almond milk. My general go-to. So we've talked about Pokemon. We've talked about success in the context of media franchises. They are the largest media franchise in the world. They've done very well for themselves since they've been established in 1995. A little bit younger than the era of Magic, 25 years. Next year will actually be the 25th anniversary as a whole. 1995 was when it was first established. The concept wasn't really fully hashed out yet. We didn't see product in the US until 1999. That was the beginning of it. Today, we know how big it is. Largest media franchise in the world, valued total over $90 billion, pushing $100 billion. That's more than Star Wars. Star Wars comes in at $70 billion. Mario comes in about $40 billion. Marvel, the Marvel Universe, Batman, Spider-Man, all these others, most of them are between 25 and 30 billion. Pokemon just completely blows them out of the water. If you go onto the corporate page for Pokemon, you can get some of the metrics that they published, just as a way to really put into perspective how big the franchise is. I'll read off some numbers here very quickly. This is all publicly available. You can go on the website and check it out for yourself. For video games and figures, they've shipped 368 million copies of the games across all eras. Again, this is the full history. This is at the bottom of the page. It says this data is current as of March 2020. This would be following the release of Sword and Shield, the most recent generation of Pokemon. 368 million video game copies sold. It's available in 9 languages. For the trading card game, they have printed and sold over 30.4 billion cards in 13 languages and in 77 regions across the world. And the TV show, the animated series that we all know, 176 areas across the world. Very wide reach, very expansive. Everyone knows what Pokemon is. Even people who are probably out of touch are still familiar with Pikachu. That's really the face of Pokemon. That's kind of the marquee Pokemon. Most people know what the base set Charizard is. Again, really the face of Pokemon, kind of the go-to when people talk about Pokemon cards. When people talk about Pokemon, that's really how the game started. That's the most iconic card, I would argue, in Pokemon, and probably finding a nice first edition copy is really the holy grail for Pokemon collecting. So we'll go in. Let's look at, again, kind of the timeline. We know it started in 1996 in Japan. It wouldn't be until 3 years until it started hitting the markets in the US. The first print run was relatively small base set. We know how scarce it is, how hard it is to find copies of these cards, how hard it is to find sealed product. There's a lot of demand for it nowadays. This was at the time when Wizards of the Coast, the company that currently prints Magic the Gathering, they had the licensing rights to print TCG, the Pokemon TCG in the U.S. That was when they had started to print it. They would continue to print it through 2003. The first few generations of Pokemon would be printed by Wizards of the Coast until they no longer had the licensing to do so. So Gen 1, the one we're most familiar with, Pokemon Red and Blue and Yellow, those are the original video games. I would argue those are really what started the whole Pokemon craze in America. That's probably what most of us started out playing. If we did, they were on the Game Boy. Sealed copies for these games are incredibly expensive today. Because you can grade them, you can get them encased in plastic, not too different from graded cards, graded TCG cards, graded baseball cards, graded comics. Right, there is a market for grading video games. It is something that is very, very popular among collectors. Especially finding nice copies of vintage video games, very, very difficult to do. It is a very, very big market. You have a lot of people that go hunting for these early era video games sealed, trying to find them sealed. Again, this is from a generation before collecting these things was really popular, right? Most people weren't buying more than one copy. The copy of Pokemon Red and Blue I have, it's open somewhere. I'm 99% certain I don't even own the box for it anymore. I don't actually know where my Game Boy is, to be perfectly honest. Right, just to put in context, these games, in 2000, it'd be 20 years old at this point. It's pretty old. Really, really hard to come by. Finding sealed products, very, very, very hard to do so, especially in good condition. Right, the plastic deteriorates. We talked about this on my sealed episode yesterday. Really, really hard to find these. Very popular. There were several different products for the first set. For base set, this would be the equivalent of Alpha in Magic. For base set, you have first edition. That was the first edition that was printed. First edition was something that was exclusive to Wizards of the Coast. It would designate that the first print run of the set would have a stamp on it saying first edition, kind of in the middle. This is the example of a card I have here. This is a Neo Revelation Shining Magikarp. It is here, the first edition stamp. You can see it there on the left. It's kind of small, kind of hard to see. I hope it shows up on the camera all right. These cards do command a premium, mainly because they're much more scarce. For the most part, first edition cards, the print run much, much smaller, even for already small print runs at the time. So finding nice cards in first edition, pretty hard to do. First edition base set, really, really the cream of the crop for Pokemon investors. There's a lot of money that goes into them. Even first edition copies that are played are still better than trying to find unlimited versions of the same card because the print run was so much larger. Again, first edition, really you can only get it for the first printing, the initial printing of the set. There's a second printing, as it were, of base set. It's known as Shadowless. It is identical to first edition in every single way, with the exception of the first edition symbol. The way people can determine if their card is shadowless, this is a question that comes up a lot, mainly because a lot of people are rediscovering their old cards. I have a base set, there's no set symbol, all right? So you have a base set card, where does it fall? Shadowless, again, not quite as rare as first edition, but still more rare than the unlimited printing of it, as it were. It's referred to as shadowless because on the border of the art of the card, on the right side, if you look here, this is one card that I have on my desk that needs to be listed, this Doug Trio. On the right side, around the frame of the art, there is no shadow. So kind of hard to see what you're looking at. So it would be roughly where my index finger is here. You can see that there is no shadow around the frame. Whereas this Gyarados here, bring it up. You can see, again, on my index finger on the right side of the frame of the card, there is a black shadow where it's printed. This is an unlimited version. Without the shadow, it is a shadowless version. Most common question that I get is what do they have, where they're looking at. The difference between, there is a price jump. There's large difference in price when you go from, if this Gyarados, this is shadowed, this is not terribly expensive, reasonably easy to find still. If you're looking at a shadowless version, there is a price jump, and then if you're looking at a first edition Gyarados, you're looking at another price jump on top of the shadowless price. These are foils. Foils were much more fixed back then at the time. It is important to note that foils weigh differently than non-foils. This is relevant. Yesterday we talked a bit about it in my sealed video when I discussed about people who want to be buying sealed products, sealed packs, sealed boxes. This is most important for people who are buying sealed packs. At this time, when foils weighed more than non-foils, packs could be weighed. And what that means is stores at the time, when ethics were less of a thing, when social media was less of a thing, stores could go through and they could weigh their packs. And what this would mean is they could take a postal scale, a reasonably sensitive scale. We're not talking super high precision, but a postal scale, something that you put your packages on to weigh, to see how much it weighs, to know how much postage you need to pay. If you have one of those, you can put your packs on. Heavy packs meant that there were foils inside. Light packs meant that there were no foils. This is very important. If you are buying loose packs from this era online, make sure you're protecting yourself. You either want to be buying from a reputable seller. Most reputable sellers who buy these packs, if they buy them and they know they're weighed or unweighed, they will usually straight up advertise it. Weighed packs, it is almost with certainty that if your pack is heavy, you will have a foil inside the pack. Again, this comes from just a lot of sellers wanting, as a seller, they want to protect themselves. If they can't know for certain that packs they bought were weighed or unweighed, then most of these sellers will weigh the packs and sell them as such. That is the ethical thing to do. That is what people should be doing if they cannot provide provenance as to where the pack came from. A lot of box openings, when people do this, people will open up the box straight away and either give you the option to buy a heavy pack or buy a light pack. This is, again, the ethical thing to do. You want to make sure that you are protecting yourself. If you're buying something, make sure it has provenance. If you're buying it as a heavy pack, you're likely to do well. You are going to pay premium for them. If you're going to buy a light pack, understand that you will not be hitting the foil, some of the really premium cards that you may want to be opening inside these packs. If they're advertised as such, there's nothing wrong with buying light packs. A lot of people buy packs to keep them sealed. That's, again, the intrigue, the appeal of sealed product. A lot of people buy light packs because they're collecting art sets. Art sets simply refers to collecting one of each booster pack art. Very prevalent in Pokemon, much more prevalent than in Magic. In Pokemon, people like to collect one of each art for the packs. For example, one of the listings I have, Evolution's booster packs, much more recent product we'll talk about a little bit later. This is an example of an art set. Excuse me. This is a listing I have online. It's very simple, one of each art. There's 4 different arts here. You get one of each. Fairly popular among older packs. People do like collecting one of each art. It makes for a cool display piece. It kind of is a different way of collecting sealed product that's more than just one pack, but not quite as much as a box. Most people fall somewhere in between, so that's why collecting art sets is fairly common. If people just care about having the art set and having the booster pack, that's why people buy light packs. Again, they don't care about the contents. They're not concerned about the value of the contents because they're not looking to open it up. They just want the sealed pack, which is why light packs actually do sell. It does seem a little bit counterintuitive. It may seem that people only want the heavy packs because of the value inside. It's still a gamble to be opening up heavy packs, mainly because heavy packs you do pay a large premium for, again, with the knowledge that there will be foils inside, and with foils you're more likely to get one of the heavy hitters inside the set that are more likely to offset the costs of a box, or to offset the cost of a pack, excuse me. So Generation 1, we start with base set. That's the first printing, the first expansion, Jungle. Then we have Fossil. These are some of the more recent ones. Again, people who are my age, early 30s, early to mid 30s, probably most familiar with product around this time. This is really when people got started. This was probably when the craze for Pokemon was very, very high. It was new. It was exciting. This is what people were wanting. A lot of stores were having a very hard time keeping these sets in stock. Mainly, again, demand is very high. I remember when I was going to my game store as a little kid at the time, right? I'm 10 years old at this point. I would have to like beg my parents to take me like on the weekend or something. Usually they're only allocating like one pack per person, a few packs per person. You simply could not get the product because of how little they printed the product relative to how much demand they were. This is something that they would slowly catch up on over time. They'd be better once they realized that there was a lot of demand. There would be more product printed to kind of keep up with demand. But again, this is at a time when collecting really in its infancy, nowhere near as big as it was today. Even your largest game stores really wouldn't be carrying a lot of product. From what I remember, the few different stores in my area, they were only carrying a small amount, relatively speaking, of each product. They weren't carrying like cases and cases and cases of product like we know today. One, because they simply there wasn't that much available, and two, without knowledge of how well the game would do, a lot of stores really weren't going too deep with their distributors and trying to buy into this product. So those are some of the early sets that we're most familiar with. Base set, Jungle, Fossil, these were some of the earlier expansions. They were much smaller in size. I believe Fossil is actually the smallest English set released. It only has, if I pull up my notes here, I want to say like 64 cards. All still Generation 1, right? These are all Pokemon that were inside the red and blue versions of the game. This is something that they would adopt over time. Each new generation would have a new video game. With the new video game, there would be the introduction of new Pokemon. So Generation 1, we're still looking at the base sets. These are really kind of the pinnacle of Pokemon collecting in terms of sealed product. There's 7 total sets. Base set, the Alpha, Jungle, Fossil, base set 2, which is a reprint of the original base set. A lot of printing errors were fixed. You have some very interesting misprints from base set that were largely fixed in base set 2. You still have a lot of the marquee cards. A lot of the cards are identical in print. The only real difference is that instead of having no set symbol like base set 1, base set 2 has a base set 2 symbol on the card. Team Rocket, this is the introduction of Team Rocket, very popular as well. And then Gym Heroes and Gym Challenge, right? You have the gym trainers from the game having their own set. That's really Generation 1. Those are most of these boxes have exploded in popularity recently. The value on these of the cards themselves, very, very dependent on condition. People are looking for clean copies of these cards, and the foils especially. That's where a lot of the price comes from. You have a lot of people that are opening up these packs. People are intentionally buying heavy packs. Again, remember, everything from this era can be weighed. So again, protect yourself. If you're buying, know exactly what you're buying. If you plan on opening it, have the understanding that if you're trying to open it and get value, you want to be getting heavy packs if you can afford it. If you're looking at light packs, you're not going to open up a lot of value. It may be better to keep the pack sealed as such. If it is something that you plan on holding and reselling in the future, do the ethical thing. And if you buy a light pack, make sure you're selling it as a light pack. Don't mark it as a heavy pack. Make sure that you're able to weigh it and be able to provide that provenance to someone else that you're selling it to in the future. So these packs, foils, really make up the bulk of the value inside the booster pack. That's why a lot of people buy them. The foils, if you get clean foils without scratches, and you grade them, that's really going to be worth a lot of money, especially if you're hitting towards like the 9.5, 10 grades for depending on which grading service you use. You can refer to my grading videos to get a little bit better idea of what grading means. But really, that's what you want. That's really what you want to be aiming for. Aim for the top. That's really where you're going to see the most return on your money if you're looking for doing so. A fairly popular thing people do as well is people try and buy these cards raw and take the gamble and grade them themselves. This is a pretty big gamble. Personally, I would not do this, mainly because grading is so subjective. A card that may be sold to you as near mint does not necessarily mean it's going to be a 9, a 9.5, or a 10. That's a big gamble you're taking. If you can't physically see the card in person and be able to inspect it, I probably wouldn't buy a card with intention of grading it. And for the most part, if you're looking at TCG Player, if you're looking at eBay, people that are selling raw cards have the price baked into the condition. Anything that's selling as near mint is going to have a huge price premium over your normal cards, because people know that if the card is going to have a big grade, it's going to sell for a lot of money. Some people don't necessarily have the know-how or willingness or the patience to grade themselves, so that's why they're trying to sell as raw with a large premium. Again, this isn't something I really care for. If you do think that your card is good enough to get a good grade, I would just go through the trouble and grade it yourself, even if it means using a middleman. We had Charlie on here last Friday in his interview. If you just want to grade one card with Charlie, he has the means to help you do that. It does require patience, but if it's something you're looking to sell, especially if you dug up old cards and you kept them in good condition, it's worth the time, worth the effort for you to get the cards graded yourself if you think they are as nice as they will be, because the premium on the graded cards are so much higher. We'll go forward. That's enough about Generation 1. We could go on about each individual set, the value inside each individual set. That would take forever to do. If we go onwards, Generation 2 is the Neo series. We have Neo Genesis, Neo Discovery, Neo Revelation, Neo Destiny. Generation 2 for Pokemon. This is kind of the next era, as it were. As a straight up disclaimer, my memory of these is a little bit fuzzy. I try and connect my experience at the time with the hobby as time goes on. This isn't something I can really connect with. One, I was already more into Magic at this time, so Pokemon I kind of outgrew it, as it were. It was kind of the less cool thing to do at the time. Silly as that sounds, Magic was more of what I was into. So I didn't really have experience. This was kind of past the point where I was trying to go to game stores to be seeking out and buying Pokemon cards. But the Neo cards, the biggest draw for them is you have Shining cards. We've talked about this a few times on the video. They are kind of the next step in high-end cards, as it were, that are not promos, are not exclusive or esoteric. So here's 2 copies of them from different sets. So this is a Shining Kabutops. I recently bought this online. This is the first edition. You can see indicated this was still when they did the first edition stamps on them. So they're fairly cool. They're in 2 different sets. They are in Destiny and Revelation, the last 2 sets of the Neo series. There's 4 total sets. They're roughly split. I think there's like 5 and 5 between the 2 of them. The Shining Charizard in the set, that's really the big Charizard that people go for. Charizard, because it has such a name attached to it, any card that is Charizard will naturally have a premium. The closest analogy that we have in Magic, any card that has Mox that we've seen over the years, there's always that allure of its connection to the Power 9. It will always command a price. A lot of Moxes have been bust. Not all of them are broken. But naturally, when people see Mox, people draw parallels. People look on the history of Magic. People think back to how broken the Moxes were, how broken free mana is. And they make that connection to Moxes. Kind of similar when we ever have a card that has time in it, an allusion to Time Walk. Also one of the Power 9, take an extra turn. We always kind of see that connection to how powerful those cards can possibly be. Shining Charizard, I don't have one that's readily available right now. Some of the collection is stored off-site securely for insurance purposes, for safety purposes. Shine Charizards, again, Pinnacle set. These shiny Pokemon still very, very popular right now. There's a lot of people that are looking to buy these. They have a very cool foiling process. It's kind of hard to see in the picture. On the video, I can show, like, if you look, the Kabutops itself has a very specific, nice foiling. It is very, very shiny compared to a regular card. This is a theme that Pokemon still has continued to adopt to this day for having shiny Pokemon. I hope the video is... Yeah, you can kind of see the reflections just on the Pokemon itself. These cards are pretty cool. That was really the big pieces for the Neo sets. That's really what people are trying to hit when people open them. Those are, again, kind of the next step below the base set cards, like the true vintage cards. People look at these original Shining cards. Moving on, Legendary Collection. Legendary Collection, largely a rehash of the base set as well. For the most part, nothing is too different. In Legendary Collection, these boxes were very, very cheap not too long ago, but they have also since exploded in price. The biggest draw was that they included box toppers. There's these oversized cards. It's something that Magic has taken a page of it. Their oversized cards are probably about this big. They're inside the booster boxes of variants inside the boxes. The biggest draw, and the reason why Legendary Collection is worth noting, especially for investors, for people who are looking to buy, is a very unique foiling process on their reverse foils. That's something we'll talk a bit more about later, but in general sense, you have a card. It can be like any card. For example, you have non-foils, and you have cards that are foil, and then you have cards that are reverse foil. So reverse foils, generally speaking, instead of the art being foil, like we normally see on most cards where the art is foil, the foiling pattern will be on everything but the art. So the art will be non-foil, but you'll see some type of pattern or some sort of unique foiling process that is in the rest of the card, in the text box, the name, etc. That's what people refer to when there's reverse foils. So it really added a second element of collecting to the game. But uniquely to Legendary Collections is the foiling process. That's something that is a big draw for people. The one I have here, do have a copy of a Legendary Collections reverse foil Charizard. Pulled up on the camera. This foiling is unique to this set only for the reverse foils. It is very, very popular. This is also one of the things that people have done very well with. These cards have exploded in price. It's caused the boxes to explode in price. It really does not show very well on the camera. I'll try and show it again here. So the process is, again, there is a swirly pattern, the foiling pattern not on the art itself. The art itself is non-foil. It's all around the outside of the card. Again, unique to Legendary Collections. It really does deserve a special star mention as a result. People like these, even the foils, the reverse foil commons and uncommons are worth a substantial amount of money. Again, people like the reverse foil that much because it's unique to the set. This is the only set that has this, that people do like Legendary Collections for as a result. The last three sets that were printed during the WotC era is kind of the golden age, as it were. the E-card series. This is when I believe it was with Game Boy Advance. There's an interesting concept where you could basically swipe these cards through an e-reader. It contained data on them, and then you'd be able to incorporate that into your game somehow. So a lot of these cards a little bit different. They look a little bit different. This is a Crystal Kingdra from the e-card reader. So the e-reader series, you can tell there's a symbol on the bottom left. That's the e-reader card component of it. And then you can kind of see these bars on the right. I assume that's where the component reads the code. Not familiar with it, but these crystal Pokemon, fairly popular. These sets are very, very limited in print. Probably, I don't have numbers. Again, Wizards of the Coast was past the point where they published numbers at this point, but they knew that because they were losing their licensing with Nintendo, they would no longer have the rights to print Pokemon. Skyridge is the last set printed with Wizards of the Coast. Skyridge probably has one of the shortest print runs of any expansion in Pokemon, base set included. Skyridge boxes sealed are probably about $40,000 at this point. They were a fraction of that price not too long ago, but each passing year it seems like they get more and more and more expensive. They have a very cool look to them, and these cards that you can find inside, there are the crystal Pokemon. There's a crystal Charizard. That's, again, one of the biggest heavy hitters you can open, is inside as well. Finding nice graded copies on those. Very, very, very expensive. Very popular among Charizard collectors. Those two sets, if they continue their current trend, it wouldn't surprise me if we're looking at $50,000, $60,000 for these Skyridge boxes within the next year or so. The prices keep climbing. There's no real reason for them to slow down. I'm not saying that you should go out there and buy a Skyridge box right now. You have to figure out how much you have in liquid assets, how much that money means to you, and if that's really something that you want to set aside and put your money into and gamble and sit on. The important thing to note is that these things, you will have to sit on them. A lot of sealed product prior to this year, we didn't really see an explosion in price. Pokemon, like most of our collectibles, has really started to take off since the pandemic. So sealed product is really what people are drawing a lot of attention to. We did talk about sealed product a lot. We kind of gave an explanation. Content creators, YouTube streamers, Instagram, people are opening these up, have really pushed the price on these. So it's debatable. Some people do think this is a bubble. Some people think that, like with all commodities, you can't have prices at this exponential rate last forever. It's simply not sustainable. So who knows? Do I think that these prices are at high? They are at a high in their history. Do I think that they're all-time high? Unlikely. Again, we have to remember that all these cards from base set up until Skyridge that we're talking about right now, all these cards were printed with WotC. It's very, very unlikely that they will ever be printed again. Granted, Pokemon doesn't really do reprints, mainly because their game is always fueled by the next generation that comes out. So there's no real reason for them to ever visit Generation 1, Generation 2, and reprint these cards. So they'll continue to be more collectible. They'll continue to be more rare. As more money comes in, as more attention is drawn to the market, I suspect that these boxes will continue to go up. But again, take that with a grain of salt. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future looks like. But if you have the money to do so, vintage boxes will always do well. Again, the idea is that they're reasonably well protected. It's unlikely that there will be anything that causes them to crater in value. You may see prices cool off. They may level a little bit. Once maybe the pandemic is over, people are looking to sell these boxes off. But again, there's not really much downward pressure on these boxes. They are scarce. There's not a lot of any one box on the market at any given time. So finding them, especially in good, clean condition, pretty hard to do so. They do make good investment pieces for that reason. Moving onward, talking about Generation 3. Again, this is kind of a time I wasn't really into Pokemon. So it's not something I'm super familiar with. This is kind of past the point where I had followed Pokemon. I knew about it. It was something that I was at the game stores when I would go to them, but I was more focused onto Magic. That was really what I knew. So I know. So Generation 3, first, these are the first sets for Pokemon not printed at Wizards of the Coast. So the boxes look different. The gameplay has changed a little bit. A lot of these boxes are fairly scarce as well. This is, again, I would argue, from my understanding, a lot of this is anecdotal. This is kind of a downtime for Pokemon. This is kind of when it's cooling off, in the sense that a lot of people who had initially started, right, when we're talking about the initial craze in 1999, when people couldn't get enough of their hands on it, right? It's 4 years later when the first EX set, EX Ruby and Sapphire for TCG comes out. The release date says in English it is June 18th, 2003. Right, this is 4 years later. So 10-year-old me is now 14-year-old me. Again, Pokemon not quite the cool thing to do anymore. A lot of people have moved on. So a lot of people that did start out in 1999 may have moved on to other things. So this was probably kind of a slight slump for Pokemon, as it were. So to my understanding, these boxes, they're valuable. They don't quite have the same supply, mainly because they have kind of reset. Again, larger print runs than Skyridge, but still fairly rare, mainly because of how old they are, 2003, right? We're looking at a 17-year-old box, 15 to 17-year-old box at this point for a lot of these. Some of these are very popular. I do actually think some of these are relatively underpriced as well. EX Team Magma versus Team Aqua, pretty cool. EX Dragon has a Charizard in there. Still e-reader. This is what it looks like. These are fairly rare. These Charizards are a little bit on the pricey side. I think it's a few $100s for these from when I last checked. EX boxes, again, not super expensive, but they are fairly hard to find. There's not a lot of them sealed out there. The value in the boxes are generally low. Mainly it's largely concentrated in a few foil cards that make up the bulk of the value. So if you do buy one and you plan on opening it, you're going to be really, really, really hard pressed to get your money back, even with high graded copies of the singles that you open. So do take that with a grain of salt. I do suspect there may be a time when these singles surge in price. When the singles surge in price, it causes the sealed product to surge in price. Also vice versa, when sealed product dries up, it causes the singles to become more expensive as well. It's kind of a weird chicken and egg scenario. It's really, really hard to pinpoint what they are. We have seen examples of both of these happening. It's really hard to pinpoint which one's the chicken, which one's the egg, and which one came first, and what was the cause of these. So those are a few EX sets. EX Fire Red, Leaf Green, kind of a throwback to Generation 1. The Charizard out of the set. Again, we keep mentioning this. Whenever a set has Charizard in it, I would pay special close attention to it, mainly because Charizard's so marquee, so collectible. The trend of Charizard being a big Pokemon, lots of health, with a big fire attack, or an attack that requires a lot of energy. It's always going to be a throwback to that base set Charizard. That's usually how Charizards are designed. They're big, they're flashy, and almost always they're unplayable, but they always have a lot of value because of the name. The name Charizard, again, just demands a level of royalty, of that pedestal that will always sit on. They'll just put it ahead of every other Pokemon. So sets that do have Charizards generally tend to do pretty well. So it's kind of the first generation, EX Generation 3. Generation 4, we have the Diamond and Pearl series, Platinum series, Heart Gold, Soul Silver series, called Legends. Again, not super familiar with these. A lot of these boxes are quite difficult to come by as well. This is an era when Pokemon has started to pick up again. Pokemon is really starting to push the TCG now. This is kind of the birth of competitive play. So you have players all over the world starting to compete in Pokemon now. It's really starting to pick back up again from what I would argue was kind of its slump after Wizards of the Coast lost its right to print Pokemon cards. So Generation 4 being Diamond Pearl. This came out in English May 23rd, 2007. Right, 13 years old at this point. Pretty old still. There are a few notables in here. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, one of the more popular boxes. I think the art is particularly gorgeous. A lot of singles are actually a pretty big deal as well. They have made some changes to the card, to the cards. Some of the full art, not full art. The energies do contain a very special foiling that people like. Those foils, super liquid. They do well. It's hard to find them in nice condition because you generally see them played. So finding clean copies of the Heart Gold, Soul Silver energies are pretty rare. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, 2010. When Charlie was on with us, he had kind of talked that this was when he was starting to get in 2009, 2010. Right, we're looking at cards that are a decade old at this point. Again, very, very hard to find sealed product during this era, simply due to level of availability. Pokemon, again, really hasn't started to pick up. 2010, this was when, a little bit before the introduction of Modern. Magic hasn't really picked up either. Magic still kind of scaled back compared to where it is now. Events haven't really taken off yet. We won't really see card prices, collectability, increase in attendance in Magic until 2011 with the introduction of Modern. 2011 is where it starts to pick up. 2012, 2013, this is when we start to see card prices really explode as more people get into the game. There's more demand for Modern, more demand for competitive play. Pokemon is starting to go through this kind of surge as well. I think this is when a lot of people did get their start. For people who haven't been in the game since the beginning, this is probably when they started to pick it up. That's really with Generation 4. Generation 5 is the Black and White series. So Black and White series, we're kind of entering like what I would call the beginning of the modern era of Pokemon. Still fairly old. Black and White was released in 2011. The game was very, very popular at the point. I do believe I remember reading somewhere that Black and White was probably one of the best-selling versions of Pokemon. This is when they were starting to expand. They started to do things that were pretty different. The most notable things about this Generation 5, are the Plasma series. The cards are very, very unique. You have some. This is when they were really starting to push the envelope on collectability. I think the most notable pieces here are the secret rares. They contain, excuse me, Plasma Storm, probably the front leader of the pack. It has a gold border Charizard that's a secret rare. A secret rare, technically not within collector number. Plasma Storm. The set goes up to 135, but 136 is the Charizard, 136 out of 135. That's usually what is meant by secret rares. Cards are technically outside the collector numbers for the set. There's 137, which is a Blastoise, and 138 out of 135, which is a trainer secret rares. These cards, very, very cool. I think this is... It's really hard to pinpoint a specific time or a specific example, but I think Pokemon is really starting to push the envelope on collectability at this point. People realize that if you just want a basic version to play on some of these cards, you can not need to spend a lot of money. You can get just a simple non-foil version. The trainers, kind of the backbone of the TCG. Ultra Ball was kind of one of the cornerstone trainers at the point. Uncommon, only gonna set you back a few bucks because it was printed as a secret rare inside Plasma Freeze. The secret rare Ultra Ball at the time was really what people went to when they wanted to pimp out their deck, to make their deck fully foil, to make their deck as expensive as possible. This is a trend that's very, very prevalent among Japanese TCGs. A lot of people do like to make their deck as visually attractive as possible, getting the highest rarity of cards. A lot of card games in Japanese TCGs, you do see there's rare, there's double rare, there's triple rares. It really pushes the envelope on what rarity means and how high collecting goes. Again, functionally the same. The beauty about Pokemon is the barrier to entry is much lower. Again, if you're just looking to play, you can just find your most basic version of your EXs, GXs, Vs, kind of your base Pokemon. There's always going to be a cheap baseline version for you to get in, for you to play the game. And then there will always be secret rares, full art versions, all these different things that makes the game visually attractive, that makes it very cool. It's always cool when people fully foil out their deck, max rarity their deck. It adds kind of a certain element of coolness. It doesn't really exist in Magic, mainly because foils kind of have a taboo in Magic. The foiling quality is, in my mind, for Magic, fairly poor. I think Magic could certainly take a page out of Pokemon cards. Pokemon just naturally has a much better card stock. The cards feel nicer. They're thicker. They don't experience the same level of warping that that Magic cards do. Magic cards foils do particularly poorly in humid weather, in moisture. Any of these things will cause severe warping to your foils. That's why foils haven't really caught in Magic. That's why foils have actually almost become a liability in terms of how difficult they are to sell. They're fairly illiquid. They don't sell super fast. There's just not a lot of demand for them. There's so many printings of foils that it really kind of negates how cool foils are in Magic, whereas in Pokemon, a lot of the secret rares continue to do very well simply as a collector item because people like to get the maximum rarity on the cards because they're collectible, because they're cool, they look very different. That's why I think Pokemon has really tapped into the collector market very well as a result. So Plasma Storm, this is kind of the beginning of this. One interesting thing to note about Plasma Storm is the introduction of ETB's Elite Trainer boxes. Plasma Storm was the first set to introduce them. They are kind of a different type of product that is marketed along with each set. They're kind of the closest Magic equivalent would be these bundles that come out, or they used to be called, the name escapes my mind what they used to be. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was much smaller than a booster box. It contained a limited number of packs, but it contained dice, it contained coins, it contained the outside box had art on it that was unique to the set. These Elite Trainer boxes, this was something that they started out doing with Plasma Storm. This was kind of their first experiment. They proved to be very, very popular. It was a very cool gift. One thing that I think Pokemon does well, this is something that when I've listened to their presentations given out at Gamma is a trade conference for distributors, manufacturers, and game store owners and retailers. It's something that's held yearly. It's a great meeting. A lot of the big game companies, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, Konami, Pokemon, right? All these games, they manufacture Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon. All the games you play, miniatures, etc., they're all there. One of the things I've always been impressed about with Pokemon, with the way they market their product, is that the boxes are visually attractive to people when they get it as a gift. And that's really where ETB's Elite Trainer boxes, where they tap into that market and they do exceedingly well, because the boxes are small, they're elegant. The price point, $34.99, is a good gift. They sell well, again, because they're kind of big. It's something that that kids, when given, they can open up, and there's a lot of different pieces inside. It's very, very, very smart marketing. It's something that's done very well. It's a good place where parents can get in. It's accessible. It's something that's cool. Right? Like in the if you look at, I don't have one handy, right? But like a VIP box for Magic, I keep picking on Magic. I think these are some of the shortcomings of Magic, right? These VIP boxes, it's not that big. It's like you're talking about a box, like this size, and it contains like 20 cards, right? Like that's kind of lame, right? For something that's $100. Whereas ETB boxes, you're looking at something that's probably the size of a bundle, right? So like a bit bigger than a booster box, probably like about this size, like this put together. these two put together, it's cool, it's exciting to open, and the price is really what did it. And so Plasma Storm, this was the introduction of them. So that box, $34.99 on release. If you look on eBay, these Elite Trainer boxes are $3,000, and that's really goes to show like how collectible they are. I know there's a lot of people that like to buy ETBs. They on one of the Facebook groups for sealed Pokemon collectors, there's someone that's trying to get one of each, trying to find them sealed in good condition. Very, very hard to do so. They're very collectible, but it goes to show how Pokemon has tapped into that market. ETBs are something that they've continued to do in the future, in future sets. Now it's just something that's released with every single set. They will always remain collectible just because it has kind of that premium over booster boxes, in the sense that it's kind of a different product. Usually most people don't buy a lot of them. They're kind of big, they're kind of bulky, they're not super space efficient. So that's why you don't really see people investing in them. But for the people, the diehard collectors, they're very collectible. A lot of people do like them. So that was one of the things that Plasma Storm did. Again, we're talking about kind of the modern era of Pokemon now. Moving onwards, Generation 6. This is the XY series. This is kind of really when I got back into Pokemon. This is kind of my beginning of my time with Kerwin's Game Store in New York, the game store that I worked with. Pokemon, naturally one of the markets I just had to know. This is something that, being around all the time, you kind of pick up on it, you kind of learn about it. XY, this was really when Pokemon started to pick up. If we remember 2016, that was the year of Pokemon Go. That was really the first like big like boom cycle when a lot of people got back into Pokemon. We saw a huge craze for Pokemon. We saw this in the United States. We saw this in Japan. People were just very, very excited about Pokemon. Pokemon Go really captured the idea of nostalgia that they had as a kid, right? We're talking the adults that download the app onto their phone, and now people are just walking around, catching Pokemon, taking walks. Lunch break, instead of eating, people are going outside, going for a 15, 20-minute walk, catching Pokemon, getting their steps in, getting their exercise in, and coming back, right? This is something that we have a good recollection of. I remember this very well. This was a great advertising tool for places that were stops, right? You'd get a lot of people. If you're a business that was lucky enough to have a Pokemon Go by your store, we saw businesses reporting a surge in business simply because people would come to their store, be playing Pokemon Go, and then I'm here, I'll go inside, I'll grab a cup of coffee, or if a game store was lucky enough to have one, people would go inside the game store. This drew a lot of attention to Pokemon. People were back to dusting off old Pokemon cards, coming out, buying vintage cards, old cards, these pretty expensive cards. That was really kind of a big boom in the Pokemon scene. That was really when I started to pick it up, and when I realized that Pokemon was going to do very well. So that was kind of beginning a bit my time at Kerwin's Game Store, the store I was with. It really taught me Pokemon. It taught me a lot more about marketing. Magic is, in my mind at the time, is very much about numbers, just numbers, right? Like you want to buy this price, sell at this price. But Pokemon, you learn about marketing. You learn about things like customer psychology, right? Like why does something like an Elite Trainer box have an appeal to someone? Why do parents around the holiday season buy these big bulky boxes? I don't actually have one on me, but you're talking like these large boxes that are probably like the size of like my like 24-inch monitor here, right? These big bulky products that only contain a small number of packs and like one or two promos, right? But these boxes selling for like $40-$50, way more than the value of the contents inside individually, but they sell. And again, that's something that Pokemon really does well with marketing. I think that's why Pokemon is like successful as it is. If you look at the breakdown for the media franchise, a majority of their sales are actually merchandise as opposed to trading cards. The merchandise is really what puts it over the edge. You have people that still like buying plushes, right? So I've showcased plushes on here before, right? Toys, these various things that really, really, really sell the Pokemon brand. Evolutions was kind of the last of the XY. The standout note about Evolutions is Charlie had mentioned when he was on. It was kind of the beginning of like when they're really trying to capture the collector's market. Evolutions is a throwback to base set. It has a lot of the original cards in the original art form. It was like kind of weird. It was something that was a little bit different. It was very popular at the time, mainly because Pokemon was really trying to capture that nostalgia with trainers, with people who are picking up Pokemon again from Pokemon Go. Right, this is kind of the barrier to entry. This was something that was familiar with them. You did see a lot of people picking up Evolutions, simply as a way of collecting again, as a way of introducing people back to the Pokemon hobby. So Evolutions was kind of the beginning of that. Ever since, Pokemon has kind of expanded. Traditionally, prior to this, Pokemon kind of followed a relatively set pattern of quarterly releases for new sets, right? You get 4 sets a year, like clockwork. Now, we have the introduction of this 5th set. It kind of fits in around the holiday season, right? This is when people are trying to squeeze a little bit more sales. Nostalgia's kicking in, right? Like they're using the marketing to try and overpower a lot of these places and try and like overpower the incentive to be buying other things and getting people really capturing that nostalgia, really capturing these cards are familiar to you. You've seen these cards before. You're playing Pokemon Go, right? Like this is kind of the perfect storm. They bring it all together. They're getting people back into the game and getting people back into the hobby. So that's kind of Generation 6. Again, we're really into recent Pokemon now. Generation 7, right? This is Sun and Moon. This is the video game series before most previous to this one. 2 sets of note that are worth noting for people who want to buy. Ultra Prism is one of the shortest printed sets in modern era. For whatever reason, there's only a very limited number of print runs. The product sold out very, very quickly at the distributor level. Once it sold out at the distributor level, people started to buy it up. So these boxes, they have no real reason to be as expensive as they are, simply due to scarcity. Though this may be worth investing. They're reasonably expensive for modern era boxes, but again, scarcity. If you look down the line, if you're trying to think about 5 years, 10 years in the future for Ultra Prism, right, when people are trying to get one of each box for this era, one of the big things that people do like to collect is get one of each box from an era, right? Someone will try to get all of the Generation 7 boxes, for example. Anyone who's looking to do so, Ultra Prism is likely to be their choke point. The boxes are more expensive than the rest of Generation 7. Because of their scarcity, it may be worth buying them now and holding on to them as prices increase. If assuming linear increase, Ultra Prism will always stay ahead of the rest of the boxes, and it may look, instead of linear increase, we may look at a slight exponential growth simply due to how scarce it is relative to other boxes. Some of their boxes from Sun and Moon Generation 7 had actually received reprints. Another one to note, Burning Shadows. The biggest note about Burning Shadows, it is a Charizard set. There is a Charizard. There's a secret rare Charizard inside. If you get that Charizard, if you get a nice version, you get graded. You're already looking at at least $1,000, probably like $1,000, $1,500, probably more. I haven't really followed up on the history, but the most recent ones I saw that were available for sale are really pushing the envelope. And Burning Shadows, we're looking at a set that's like 3 years old at this point. Like it's really not that old of a set. And for it to have a card that's that expensive inside is a pretty big deal. That's why Burning Shadows is also worth looking at. Burning Shadows is just kind of another example in the history of Charizard sets do well. Any set that has a Charizard inside will do well. I think that's a very good solid rule to follow. Again, Charizard will never fall in popularity. It will always be there. If you type in Charizard on TCG Player, there are just many more listings for Charizard cards, for variations of the Charizard cards. It's really a card that stood the test of time. It keeps seeing reprints in the sense that people keep making it a lot of new sets. Darkness Ablaze right now, it has Charizard V. People are grading those. The grade copies are selling very well. This card alone, the Charizard V, completely unplayable in the TCG. it's like $100 on online. Most sales in this card for $100. Very, very popular. The secret rare, very popular, very hard to pull. And we're talking about a card. Darkness Ablaze is the most recent printing of Pokemon. It's the most recent Pokemon set, and there are cards inside that are $100. And this is a card that's completely unplayable, right? If you look at that in the context of Magic, right there, you can't have an unplayable card and have it be $100, right? It doesn't matter like how cool it is, right? It has to be powerful. It has to be rare in some form for it to be that expensive, right? We just don't see that with current sets anymore, right? But Darkness Ablaze, Charizard set, $100 card that you can open inside. Darkness Ablaze, we'll kind of wrap it up with the current era for Sword and Shield. Darkness Ablaze is probably a box product that I would be targeting as well, mainly because the presence of that card will make this box valuable in the future. So again, very cut and dry rule. It's a rule that's very simple to follow. If a set has Charizard in it, it will do well in the future. This is a fairly straightforward mantra. I do think that in the context of investing, of wanting to throw your money at something that's easily accessible, if you look around, you can definitely find deals on these. I would be okay buying a case of this, putting it in the closet, forgetting about it, right? 5 years in the future, this Charizard still gonna be popular, still gonna be cool. The boxes will appreciate above to where they are now. If you look at the context of Burning Shadows, right? We were talking about set 3 years old. I don't think it's that much older than that. 3 years old, right? Like these boxes, when you retail on them $79.99, right? You probably buy them for $90, $100, right? These boxes are like pushing $300 in 3 years. So that's something that you can definitely do well with for Modern Era. If Modern is what you're looking to do, if you're just looking to get into Pokemon right now, you're brand new, starting out, Darkness Ablaze is something that I can definitely recommend. If you're going to open it, you'll definitely be able to get cards that are new for your collection, right? It's going to be relevant, it's new, it's going to be in the game for quite some time until the sets rotate. But if you're opening it, right, and you still have that chance to spike that Charizard, you're going to do very well for yourself. If you want to hold on to sealed product, I think that's a perfectly fine play as well. Those are kind of generations of Pokemon, barely scratching the surface. At some point, I'll probably go back. We'll look at some of the sets even more. We'll look at individual cards that do well. That really make up the bulk of the EV inside these sets. Every set is valuable in some form or another. Sure, in the Modern Era, you have some sets that are busts. You do have to be kind of careful when you're looking at Modern Era sets. Unlike vintage sets, right? Those sets will always do well. They'll always continue to appreciate. A lot of Modern Era sets are kind of busts, and that's simply due to sheer volume, how much of that set exists, how many of those packs exist, and how little the cards inside are worth relative to some of these sets, right? Sets without the Charizard, without kind of that big marquee card that really pushes the value. Some of these Modern Era sets haven't really grown that much, but you can't forget about the collectors. You can't forget about the people. If they want one of each box or whatever for a particular generation, they're going to have to buy the crappy sets, right? Not every set is going to be an Ultra Prism or Burning Shadows. In the case of Generation 7 for Sun and Moon, right? Some of the sets kind of bust. That's just kind of reality of it, right? But if they want one of each for their display, for their collection, they're still going to have to be buying the lower value sets. The boxes, some of those may be worth picking up. You may not see a huge appreciation on their value over time, but if you can afford the money, if you can afford the space, probably not the worst idea to just buy a case of it, throw it away in a closet or a storage unit, and just forget about it until we see another price surge in Pokemon, and then maybe open it up, look at it, and say, man, these boxes are definitely worth, appreciably more than what I paid for them a few years back. So that being said, thank you for listening. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can follow Vermilion on the right at the social media platforms listed. As always, thank you for listening. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe, and we will be back tomorrow with more. Thanks again.